Hey, everybody, welcome to Moment of Clarity. Thanks for joining me. Please take a second to click thumbs up and subscribe and all that good shit. I got some cool stories for you on this episode. We're going to dig into it. There's a bill that's been introduced, two bills that have been introduced to Congress, one for a guaranteed income proposal, another for a separate version of GDP. Another version of GDP that actually could tell us in reality how the world is working, which is kind of important. But so take a second to share this, to click thumbs up, to if you have a couple of pennies, feel free to donate on the super chat. All that money goes to people who are struggling, people who need a little solidarity fund, people who need a little help. And if that's you, you can email commoncensored@protonmail.com. That's the name of my podcast, commoncensored@protonmail.com with a D, censored with a D. Hey guys, hey Blaze, hey Elias, hey peoples. I'm kind of burnt out. You ever been burnt out? I'm burnt out, man. I've had too much information going through the brain holes. Does the brain have holes? Guess it does now. I'm feeling pretty burnt out. But luckily I have a vacation coming up. I have a bit of a break coming up, so you're not going to see a whole lot, or at least not as much from me for the next 2 weeks. But there is a new redacted VIP tonight. A new redacted tonight will come out tomorrow on Friday. So, and I'll be on those. I'll be there. So have no fear. And then next week, there'll be a new redacted VIP, which I'll be hosting. But Redacted Tonight will be hosted by Naomi Caravani to give me a little break. And we got this week on Redacted Tonight, we have a brand new correspondent, by the way. You got to catch that. But anyway, let's get into these stories. I agree, Jonathan. Without me here, who will stop the corruption? Jonathan, don't look now, but there's a woman behind you. I know it's kind of frightening, but she's right there in your thumbnail photo. So you just don't turn around right now. You're in trouble. I agree. Zavi, I guess, was saying that you haven't heard it mentioned anywhere about these stories. And I think it's because these bills were introduced by Ilhan Omar, which our mainstream media will not cover. And here's the thing. Let's just get this out of the way up top. I'm not a supporter of everything the squad does. I'm not one of those like, hey, everything the squad does is fucking gold and they fart unicorns. Is it possible to fart unicorns? That sounds painful. No, I go by actions and I go by, things I support. If you actually do the thing I support, then I will support that. But people who either say, oh, yeah, everything they do, I like the squads, everything they do is just fucking wonderful. People who do that, they're wrong, because everything the squad is not. The squad has done plenty of things that are not fucking wonderful. They've voted for things that are not wonderful. AOC has tweeted that John McCain was a man of unparalleled human decency, which I will debate that. I would say John McCain was a man of unparalleled human indecency. So maybe she just forgot a few letters in the tweet. So anyway, I don't go for that. But I also don't go for the idea that, like, look, these people have done some fucked up shit or voted for something that was fucked up or whatever. So therefore, I won't even support the things I support because it's put forward by them or it's being done by them. Like, how does that make any sense? So, if someone's having this debate with you and they say, but they voted for, like for example, AOC is garbage on Venezuela, Cuba, most foreign policy, or a fair amount of it. And so people will go, well, she's garbage on that, so therefore I won't support anything else. And it's like, well, wait, what if something you really wanted was put forward in Congress? What if right now Bernie Sanders, who I know a lot of people fucking hate because he caved to Hillary and he supported Hillary and he campaigned for Hillary. So there's plenty of people out there that used to be Bernie supporters that hate him. What if Bernie Sanders right now were to put forward a bill for universal basic income? Full on universal basic income. Would you just be like, no, I don't support it because I don't like him? Or what if someone you hated even more? What if some fucking right-winger put forward a bill for universal basic income? Would you be like, no, I don't support? No, why don't you support the action or support the thing? Just, I'm not saying don't go for the hero worship of some character. Look at the action, look at the bill, look at what the person's doing, decide on that, not who they are, decide on the thing. So, anyway, I just wanted to get that out of the way. And so here is a thing that at least so far, I mean, someone could point out that there's some fine print that I'm missing, but unless that comes out, Ilhan Omar, before Congress left town, and I Googled this, and as far as I can tell, it was not covered in any mainstream media. I think Fox News did one report on it because basically to trash her. So basically you have to turn to Fox News to find the one report on something positive that was brought forward in Congress so that they could trash it. That's where you got to turn to Fox News to find that out, because the other mainstream media won't even mention it. So here are the two things that Ilhan Omar introduced. She introduced a guaranteed income bill and a GDP alternative legislation. And I'll take these separately. So first of all, on the guaranteed income bill, it's not universal basic income. So that's something you can be annoyed with to begin with. It's not universal basic income. However, it's probably better than nothing. It says that in fact, it's in the name. Let's see here. The name of the act is and man, these fucking, can we get over the thing where we try and spell out some long word with the name of the stupid act? Can we get over that? It's like the bunny rabbits are always fucking and they're dancing and they like puppy dogs, and it spells out give Halliburton a lot of money. Like the Give Halliburton Money Act or whatever. Like, they're always spelling something. It's the BARF Act. It's the heroic patriotic act, like the Patriot Act, for example. It's the heroic patriotic act. And if you look at the words, it's all garbage. But anyway, so hers is called the Support Act, SUPPORT. And that stands for Sending Unconditional Payments to People Overcoming Resistances. I don't know why it's not just resistance. Overcoming resistances to triumph. Oh, could there be any more of a word salad meant to spell something out? But here's the other thing. I know I'm already criticizing it, even though I think it's a positive, but it's a step in the right direction. But it's not. It says sending unconditional payments. Well, they're unconditional payments, but only to certain people. So it's not really unconditional. There's a condition. Are you one of the people? Are you one of the people that will get the... So the Sending Unconditional Payments to People Overcoming Resistances to Triumph Act will create a guaranteed income program, I like what I'm hearing so far, of $1,200 per month for adults, $600 for kids, following pilot programs in localities nationwide. So I assume the whole like people overcoming resistances means that it's I shouldn't use the word means that it's means tested, means that you have to be struggling in some way in order to get this, which universal basic income should be universal. And that's how you get everyone to support it. It should be universal. So that part is not good. The other thing is like, do we need more pilot programs? We've done the pilot programs. Look into UBI. It's been tested all over the goddamn world, and it always works like a charm. It ends poverty overnight. It ends homelessness just about overnight. It ends extreme destitution just about overnight. And it does not cause people to work less, as if that would be such a horrible thing. Oh, God forbid people work a little less. At doing what? What are we doing with all our increased production? Just fucking spitting out garbage marketing, just, more consumerist shit. Well, we got to have people working, or else who's going to fucking make the ad campaigns to sell the dog sweaters that keep them looking hot? These new ones are bedazzled. we don't need more productive people. So they were like, oh, people stop working. Well, good, but actually they don't. Pilot programs of universal basic income do not show a decrease in work for the most part. And whatever little decrease there is in work, it's because people are like doing things like they actually have a chance to take care of their family. They've actually had a chance to see their kids, meet their kids. Hey, what's your name? Good to meet you, little kid. You're the one I've seen running around. So anyway, clearly there's things about this I'm critical of, but no one else in Congress is putting forward any kind of guaranteed income. So I guess better than nothing. So then there's a quote here from Ilhan Omar. She says, poverty is a choice. And I think she means a choice of our country to make poor people. I don't think she means people are choosing to be poor. So not the best wording, but quote, poverty is a choice. For too long, we have prioritized endless growth while millions are homeless, hungry, or without health care. The pandemic has laid bare these inequalities. We as a nation have the ability to make sure everyone has their basic needs like food, housing, and healthcare met. That's an important point. We live in a post-scarcity world. We have the ability to meet all the needs of all the people, honestly. Now, this doesn't mean that you can buy up, 7 cars and then throw away 3 a month. No, that's not what it means. It means if everyone lived in a reasonable way, we have the ability to cover all of that and to handle that and make sure there are not people destitute in one of the richest countries in the world. Going back to the quote, building off successful pilot programs in my home state of Minnesota, I am proud to introduce the guaranteed income that will put money directly into the pockets of Minnesotans and introduce a holistic economic measure. So yeah, she's introduced that. She was talking about Minnesotans because she was speaking to them, I guess, in that quote. But guaranteed income, and here's the other thing: is if you guarantee income to a certain level, for right now, if it's means tested, then at least it would show the success of those people. So while I don't think it should be means tested going forward, like you shouldn't have to prove you're desperate to get guaranteed income, I do think that any level of guaranteed income will help people. It will help the people who are hardest hit, and it will show how effective such a program is. So Ilhan Omar puts that bill forward, no coverage on mainstream media, no talk, because here's the thing, mainstream media, along with most of our establishment politicians, along with corporate America, they don't want people to be out of destitution. They don't want people to be okay. They want people struggling. They want people poor, because a certain level of poor forces all the other people to work harder. And it makes people think that you have to fucking indebt yourself to a university. You have to indebt yourself to get a law degree or some shit. It makes people not enjoy their lives and instead fight tooth and nail to be able to afford their lives, afford their existence. And that's what corporate America wants. It wants people struggling. It wants people at the factory 24/7. So if we still had factories instead it's all just Uber and Lyft. 30% of this country is in the gig economy, which means the you're fucked economy. So yes, that is a step in the right direction. Not mentioned at all in mainstream media, as far as I could tell in my Google search. Maybe I missed one, but did not see any such thing. All right, another thing that Ilhan Omar introduced that, and for those of you who missed the beginning of this, I talked about how you shouldn't support any politician just because there's some personality you like. Oh, I just like everything this person's ever done. No, you should look at the action, look at the bill, look at what they're doing, decide whether you support that. And however, that being said, I wholly support calling some of the true shitheads, call them true shitheads. Absolutely. Here's the thing. So, like, for example, this is a reverse example I gave earlier. I gave an example of someone like Bernie Sanders putting forward a universal basic income bill. What if it was someone that you've always found utterly disgusting? Like a Ted Cruz, like just a human vomit with a bow tie on. I mean, has anyone ever looked more like just straight up vomit with a bow tie. Just if a pile of vomit were there and a bow tie were just thrown on top, or whatever kind of ties he wears, that's Ted Cruz. So if Ted Cruz would have put forward a bill that is exactly everything you support, whatever, whether it be universal basic income, whether it be universal health care, he never would. But I'm just saying, if he did, would you not support that because it's him? Maybe you should look into what it says, decide whether you support it, rather than just keeping your eyes closed. But anyway, speaking of other bills put forward, so this is another bill. Also, I did not see any mainstream media coverage of this. This is the other one introduced by Ilhan Omar, and I'll tell you what it is first, and then I'll explain more. It's called the Genuine Progress Indicator Act. And it's talking about a new indicator, which they say would not replace GDP. I think it should probably replace GDP, but would measure more than just GDP. So, it is an established fact that the degree of inequality, inclusivity, human well-being of an economy is not ascertainable from GDP per capita alone. Now, many economists are joining the Beyond GDP movement to stress the need for dynamic measures. For a long time, the United States and the rest of the industrialized world have been dependent on GDP to shape our fiscal and economic policies. This traditional measure gives weight to wealth accumulation and per capita production, but ignores income distribution, wealth concentration, and many other factors. It leaves out the human and environmental costs of economic activity, which means externalities such as social welfare and natural resource degradation are completely excluded in federal economic analysis. GDP is simply not able to give us the entire story of how our economy is doing and working for everyday Americans. So, to tell you a little more about GDP, and I've done whole segments on it. There's a redacted tonight, or maybe more than one, on GDP and how insane it is. GDP was not a thing until around World War II. Gross domestic product. It is a measure of kind of the overall economy, and as it has in the name, product. It is a measure of basically what is produced and what is accumulated, grabbed up, resources mined, etc. And at the time of World War II, that made some sense, right? Because as a country going to war, both for us and Britain and others, you wanted to see how much you could put out. How many fighter jets can we make? How many fucking bullets can we make? How many of this or that? What are we producing in order to go into war? Are we producing enough food now that the food lines have changed and things like that, the production lines? So it made some sense in World War II that you would need to know those kind of things. Then, as you, to answer that question, Tony, I can put the link to the article in the comment section. There you go. So, but GDP after World War II made a lot less sense. If you're only measuring what you produce and how much wealth or resources you acquire, think about what that's ignoring. That's ignoring the harms of the production. It's ignoring the externalities. It's ignoring the pollution, whether environments are dying, whether you're cutting down every tree you have. It's ignoring whether things are made in horrific ways like factory farming, the completely morally repulsive idea of factory farming, animals kept in pens they can't even turn around in their entire lives. It's ignoring how things are made. It's ignoring wealth inequality. inequality, whether a tiny number of individuals are getting ridiculously, grotesquely wealthy while others are becoming poorer and poorer and poorer. You could have a country that is doing great on GDP while people are becoming more and more desperate at the bottom end of the scale. So GDP does not measure how well the number of people are doing per capita, how healthy people are, whether trees are growing, whether water's clean. None of that is in GDP. GDP, in a lot of ways, by just going for a better GDP, is a recipe for death. It is a death spiral. It's basically like, let's say you wanted to produce heat because heat does things, right? You can cook stuff, you can make metal, you forge metal, a lot of heat's good for a lot of things, right? You can run steam engines. So if you're only measuring heat and then you set your house on fire and you were like, wow, the heat is going up and up and up. Isn't this great? And so your house is on fire, your family's inside, they're all dying, your dog's dying, your pets are dying, all your stuff is burning up, and you're going, we did it. We've made the most heat ever in my house. That's what GDP is. Yay! Awesome. So I've talked about how we've got to get away from GDP. Obviously, we need to throw out capitalism. I've said that constantly, but let's focus on GDP for the moment. So we got to move away from GDP. And I gave the example of a country that has done that. Now, this country is not perfect. There are plenty of things that are not great about it, but it is the only poor country in the top 10 or so. It's at least in the top 20. I think it was in top 10 for a while. Top 10 happiest countries. It's the only poor country because all the other happy countries have loads of shit, and that makes people happy. And it's Bhutan. And the country of Bhutan, which is a small country, but it has gross domestic happiness. And it measures things like health of their citizens, like green space. It measures those things. And so it takes that into account as to whether they're doing well, so that the country is not just going towards the most heat. They're going towards, are we living well? And so they are very successful on that front because they have gross domestic happiness. So Ilhan Omar, and I don't know whether she may be the first to have ever put forward, at least in recent years, to have put forward anything that says that there should be a competitor to GDP. Now, in her bill, I think she did this to try and get more Congress people to vote for it. She says it should go alongside GDP, so we should have both. Whatever. Better than nothing again. So I want to read some of this. So she talks about GDP and having this new one, GPI, they call it. GPI. Having them next to each other, working in concert. And she says, this is why I'm proud to introduce legislation for the Genuine Progress Indicator as an alternative economic measure for the federal government to use in all of its budgetary reporting and economic analysis. GPI is a much needed supplementary measure, although really it should take the place of GDP. But anyway, supplementary measure that provides a more holistic understanding to our collective socioeconomic welfare by including overlooked social and environmental costs and benefits to economic activity. And then she goes to list, where the GDP would be used. It would be used in the Bureau of Economic Analysis, et cetera. Don't think I need to read all that. It then says such factors must be considered as costs and benefits of economic productivity. GPI calculations shall consist of factors of total annual economic benefits for personal consumption expenditures. So meaning GDP doesn't measure whether an individual in America has more, ability to live. It only measures whether the country, whether the richest, have that ability. It measures it all together and says, yay, America's produced a lot of shit this year, or America consumed a lot of shit this year. Anyway, so it would calculate whether the personal consumption, public provided goods, services, higher education and workforce skills, leisure time, unpaid labor, infrastructure, ecosystem services of natural areas. GPI calculations shall consist of factors of total annual economic costs for income inequality, underemployment and unemployment, homelessness, domestic abuse, crime, pollution, land soil degradation. Heard of that? Greenhouse gas emissions. What? Depletion of ozone, traffic and motor vehicle accidents. Oh, come on. That's just people having fun. So GPI would then reiterates used alongside GDP. So those are kind of the important aspects of it. And here's how, to tell you how ridiculous, another example of how ridiculous GDP is. Countries want a higher GDP because it also attracts business. When the big multinationals see that a country has a high GDP, it looks good for them to business. It also looks good that, they have the stability to have that kind of gross domestic product. So countries want to inflate their GDP sometimes. And one example is in China. They were building, I don't know if they're still doing it, this is a few years ago, hopefully they stopped. They were building what amounted to ghost cities, what many people were calling ghost cities. They were building massive cities because China has plenty of people, plenty of money, plenty of ability to do this. And so they were doing these massive construction projects, which is good for GDP. It shows you spent money on production. It shows how much, cement you hauled, how much of that shit went on. And the GDP measures all that stuff. And it goes, wow, you're doing a lot of building. That's great. Doesn't measure how many trees you cut down, how many global emissions. None of that matters. So they built these ghost cities that almost no one is living in. Probably, I think there's some fine points of the economics as to why no one's living in them, but I think part of it is people, maybe they're not where people want to be. Part of it is that China, although China has done a really impressive job of ending extreme poverty, they took, millions, hundreds of millions of people out of extreme poverty over the past several years, which is unprecedented. They have not, or at least in China, there's not a huge, upper middle class and shit, which we don't even have a middle class anymore. So it's possible these ghost cities just were unaffordable to your average Chinese citizen. So who's going to move there? So anyway, point being, they were building, and I assume these cities are still ghost cities. They have these ghost cities sitting around that are not getting used, are not lived in. They're just there to inflate GDP. And it's fucking crazy, and it's wasteful, and it harms the environment. But same goes for the United States. Now, the United States didn't do it as a plan. Let's go build ghost cities. But we have 17 million empty housing units in this country. Empty, sitting there, not unused. I talk about this a lot because it's fucking nuts. 17 million empty units. Now, of course, that means homelessness shouldn't exist. Anybody who fears losing their apartment because of rent shouldn't exist. Everybody should be given a place to live. But that aside, I talk about that a lot. That was my point. My point is, we too are building all of this shit. A lot of it not getting used. A lot of it not getting used. A lot of people, a lot of families have 2 or 3 cars. This planet can't support that. It can't continue to go like that. It's insane. And if we considered things like GPI, and I know some of you are like, if you're in a family right now with 3 cars, let's say you and your husband, and you have an 18-year-old kid, and each of you has cars, and so it's not that unheard of. It's fairly common. But guess what? If we were actually to be rational about all this, we would build our societies differently. Not everybody would live out in the suburbs where everybody needs 3 cars. You'd have amazing public transit going everywhere all the time. So you didn't need 3 cars. So, that's the reason people get cars, because they live out in the suburbs and they need, there's no public transit, or the public transit's garbage, or it shows up once every 3 hours. And so that is yet again the failure of capitalism, the failure of advanced late stage capitalism as we're in. And some of this is connected to GDP. So GDP is one of the evil tools of capitalism. Now, I would, if I were writing Ilhan Omar's bill, this wouldn't help it get votes. So I assume she's thinking about that when she writes it. But I would also put, fuck capitalism. I just put it in like handwritten in the side. Also, fuck capitalism. And then that would be part of the bill, just like off to in every copy that was printed out, you'd see fuck capitalism off to the side. But I feel like that might hurt the number of votes they could get for it, considering we live in a capitalist shit show where all of the people in Congress are basically, okay, maybe not all, let's say 95% are capitalist sociopaths. So you're more likely to get some votes for this if you don't write that in the corner, but still. Anyway, that is the other bill that she put forward. Both of these, if they were discussed, if they were talked about, even if they didn't get passed, if this was just all mainstream media was talking, if you had fucking 24/7 coverage on CNN and all these about, well, what would it mean to have a competing economic rubric that went alongside GDP? What would it mean to have an analysis of our society that's not just about production and shitting out stuff? What would that mean? Like, to just see those discussions on mainstream media would be huge. But of course, Ilhan Omar puts forward these two bills. Not a peep. Not a peep that I saw in my extensive 3-minute Google search. The only thing I saw was Fox News covered it so they could make fun of her. That was all I saw. So basically, if you want the truth, go to Fox News and then ignore all of their arguments. So just read the headline. Ilhan Omar introduces guaranteed income plan. And then you can only get the truth at Fox News. Don't read anything in the body of the article because that is all face diarrhea. Well, I guess it's written, so it's hand diarrhea. It's diarrhea of the type. Diarrhea of the typing. Anyway. But that's how fucked up our media is. I mean, our media is so garbage that you can't even hear about real news on the mainstream media. And if you do, they're going to trash the idea that someone wanted to solve some of our problems. Okay, so hope you enjoyed that. Hope you got something out of it. These are the ideas that should be talked about amongst everyone, that should be common talking points. I mean, I haven't even seen, not that I'm spend all my time checking independent media, although there is a great place if you'd like to see an assortment of independent media, radindiemedia.com, site I just created with Eleanor Goldfield, RADINDIE media.com. That has a bunch of independent media, like the good kind. And you should just you should bookmark it, check it every day. But I haven't even seen anybody writing articles about this stuff on there, or any of the independent. I haven't seen it in Twitter. I feel like Twitter has all of the things. Maybe I missed it. Don't get me wrong. Maybe someone did cover it. But these are important topics. Even if you wanted to disagree with Ilhan Omar's bill and say it doesn't go far enough, which is what I said about the guaranteed income part of it. Actually, it's what I said about all of it. But it's a step in the right direction. Even if you wanted to disagree and say this isn't enough, still it should be talked about. We should be having these discussions. And instead, I don't see these discussions anywhere. I mean, how fucked up is that? We are so blind in this culture, in this world. We are just blindly stumbling off a cliff. And, the people that actually do talk about this shit are heavily suppressed online and attacked. So take that for what you will. So that's the moment of clarity today. I would love for you to share this with people. I'd also love for you to check out radindiemedia.com. All the donations, thank you, by the way, for those who donated. All the donations on here go to people who are struggling. All the donations on Venmo at Lee Camp go to people who are struggling. On Rockfin, those go to people who are struggling. The only place that you can support my work separately is liberapay.com/Lee Camp, LIBERAPAY.com/Lee Camp. If you are someone who needs some help from the Solidarity Fund, and we're not talking millions of dollars, we're talking hopefully $80 maybe, depending on how much is donated, email commoncensored@protonmail.com. New Redacted VIP just came out. That'll be up on my site soon. And New Redacted Tonight comes out tomorrow with a brand new correspondent. We have a new correspondent. I'm not going to tell you who it is. because it's a secret. Brand new correspondent for Redacted Tonight starting tomorrow. That's huge. It's huge, folks. And then I'm off next week. And the following week, for the most part, you'll see some of my stuff. Hopefully, I'll do a live stream. There'll be a Redacted VIP that I'm going to host next week. But mostly taking a break for 2 weeks because I'm about to fall over and hit my head on the desk. Keep fighting.